Hello everyone, and welcome to our program today. How is it? How do we know Jesus? What is it when we know Him and we have a relationship with Him? And then He tells us, follow me. And sometimes when we're following Him, it's on a high hill and we have a great experience. And yet at other times when we follow Him, it's through a valley. And through all this process, He's preparing us for the ministry, for the mission that He has prepared for us. He wants us to share what we have found with Him, with others, and the peace that we have found with Him. And so today I have with me in the studio Walter and Sonica Veith, and they come from South Africa. So I welcome you, Sonica. Walter, welcome.
Thank you.
And we'll be talking with them about their lives and how God met them in their road, in their busy life, with their family, and how He chose them, and He's been working with them, and how they're following Him. So stay tuned as we hear some of the experiences that they have to share with us. So now I understand both of you, when I talked to you in South Africa, you were not talking English to one another. You were talking Afrikaans, right?
That's right.
Now, that's a language that for me it's hard to understand, but there's some other languages that are spoken in South Africa. There's one that goes with the right? Well, what's the name of that language?
It's called Xhosa.
Okay, well, that's hard for me to understand.
But there are many languages, not just the one. There are 22, I think.
We have many languages, 11 official languages in South Africa.
Wow, so a very rich culture, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers can identify with that, with the different languages that everything is going. Because of course God is a lover of all colors and all languages and all our diversity. But I also have heard Walter speaking German, and so I understand that you come from Germany?
No, I was born in South Africa.
Okay.
Yes, I still have a label which says made in South Africa.
Okay.
My father emigrated to South Africa.
Okay.
And he was trying to keep them afloat in the heavy inflation period in Germany.
Okay.
And he met my mother in South Africa.
Oh.
And they'd also just moved out from Germany, so that's how I learned German at home.
Okay, so you were raised within a German home, but really in South Africa.
In South Africa, yes.
Okay. Now, I understand that you were telling that your father and your mother, although having that same German culture, they actually had a different religious background.
Yes, my father was Roman Catholic.
Okay.
And in fact, before he came to South Africa, he was strongly considering going into the priesthood.
Okay.
And so he was a very staunch Roman Catholic.
Oh, wow. And whereas your mother shared a different faith experience, is that right?
She was a Protestant. She was a Lutheran.
Okay.
And when they married, they decided that they would not make religion an issue.
Okay.
And he was actually the first one that took part in a double marriage.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my mother was one of twins.
Okay.
And so she desperately wanted to be married when her twin sister was also married on the same day, but they were all Lutheran.
Okay.
And so my father and my mother had the ceremony in the cathedral in Cape Town.
Okay.
And then straight afterwards went to the German Lutheran church.
Wow.
And had the double wedding, and I think he picked up some problems with the church because yeah, that was before Vatican II, so if you didn't belong to the Catholic Church, then you were lost. So this was a major problem for him.
Oh, wow.
He always had a problem with it after that.
But I mean, they must have found some solution, otherwise it would have been a big religious struggle in the family.
Yes, I don't know. My mother was very staunchly religious, but she agreed that I could be raised Catholic. Hard for me to understand today, but that's what she did.
Okay, so then you were raised Catholic, and that means you were going to Catholic schools, is that what it is?
No, I went actually to the German school.
Okay.
And there's a big German school in Cape Town.
Okay.
And they're Lutheran, largely Lutheran.
Okay.
But they had a separate religious instruction period for Catholic kids.
Okay. And I understand that as you were going through the school, your mother eventually, when you were a little older, she started having some health issues.
Yes, she got very ill when I was 8 years old. She got cancer.
Oh, wow.
They said they would give her about 3 to 4 months to live, but she stretched it to 4 years of tremendous suffering. Yes.
So she was suffering very much. And I assume, I mean, every time there is, such a serious illness in a family, that creates a lot of tensions within the family. Maybe she couldn't give you the attention anymore. And so what happened with yourself? How did you feel as you were going through that experience?
Oh, I was used to the fact that my mother was very sick.
Okay.
And the last year she was basically in bed. She was bedridden. She had so many operations, and the techniques weren't so good in those days. So when they did radiation, they burnt her.
Oh, wow.
She was burnt black, and they did operations with her. They removed large portions of her intestine when she got colon cancer.
Wow.
So she had a colostomy, she had breast cancer. Later on it became neural cancer, and then she got brain cancer, and then eventually she died. But she really suffered.
So there was a real devastating sickness. And I understand, of course, as a child, one brings all these experiences, with himself, in school, and there were some conflicts that were happening at school, I understand, because of some of the issues that you were going through at home.
Yes, I mean, everybody knew that my mother was basically on her deathbed, and the Roman Catholic nun that gave me religious instructions, she was, how shall I put this, very zealous for her faith.
Okay.
And believed, of course, that anyone that wasn't Catholic was going to be lost. Mm-hmm. And maybe out of concern for my mother, she was interested in getting her to be a Roman Catholic. Mm-hmm. And so she would make every point that she could to try and convince everyone to get her to become a Catholic.
Okay, and so although her attention might have been really positive in trying to do something good for your mom, that didn't get very well with you, though. You didn't understand that point.
No, I didn't understand that she said that my mother was going to go to hell.
Oh, wow.
And, if you're a little boy of between 8 and 12, that's all you have. That's your mother. And if you think she's going to be dead when you come home, and then you're still being told that she's going to go to hell, that freaks you out. At one stage, she gave me water from Lourdes.
Oh, wow.
And told me that I had to sprinkle it on my mother and say a prayer for her. But I didn't know how to do this, so I snuck this little bottle in there into a sick room and talked to her and made as if I accidentally threw it upon her. And of course, nothing happened. She didn't get any better. And eventually I started resenting the fact that God would put her into hell, because she was a very kind lady. And so I got angry.
And so as you were going through this struggle, I mean, some people, as they go through the same struggle, they almost go criminal, because of this anger and this bitterness that one can have. And there was all this religious struggle with people that might have all been well-meaning, really. And then your mother eventually finds rest in the Lord. She doesn't give up her faith, and she goes sleeping with the Lord. And what happens with you next?
Well, that was when I was 12 years old, and things basically went from bad to worse. My father eventually remarried. Okay. But it was a fairy tale stepmother experience. I mean, here was this rebellious kid.
Yes, of course.
Who didn't like school or hated school. I loved science.
Okay.
I mean, even as a kid, long before, you got any instruction in this field, I was reading everything about astronomy and about science in general.
Oh, wow.
And I was not like a normal kid, that reads normal stories. My bookshelf was full of Fred Hoyle and astronomy and big, heavy books that I used to take out of the library. And I built things, and I made biological experiments, and I think I was 9 years old when I built my first telescope.
Oh, wow.
Took plans out of the library, made replicas, tried and built a telescope, look at the stars. I was weird. I was a weird kid. And but I hated the school setup. the teachers and that setup, I couldn't stand it at all.
Okay.
And then when my father married my stepmother, she was not too keen with me.
Well, it was very difficult, I guess. Okay.
Yeah, so they decided, well, then I would have to go to boarding school.
Oh my! So that's an extra trauma for you, really.
Yeah, so I was out of the house, off to boarding school, and that was even worse because the boarding school and the teachers, they were all one and the same, you know. So now I was 24 hours under their thumb.
Yes.
So I would run away from school. I'd go and run into the mountain.
Oh my.
And go and live in the forest.
Oh my, okay.
And the teachers would come and look for me, and I'd climb up into the pine trees and take the pine cones and throw them with it. I was a monster.
Oh wow. So what happened? I mean, the Lord was obviously at some stage having mercy on you. And so how did you get out of that?
Well, eventually they decided, you know, that this is not working and I must get out of school.
Oh wow.
And by that time I was in, what is that now, 10th grade?
Okay.
Or going to 10th grade. I was probably in 9th grade. Highly rebellious. How I even got through all of those schools, I don't know.
Wow.
I did very well in the biological subjects, but every teacher that was mean to me, that's it. I never even opened their books. I couldn't care what they were teaching. I didn't even listen.
Oh wow.
And then eventually they decided, now I must leave school. But by that time I was so rebellious that whatever they said, I did the opposite.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I had an uncle, he was a headmaster, so I went and asked him whether I could come to his school.
Okay.
And he wasn't too keen, but he arranged with another school for me.
Okay.
A very good school and in Cape Town. So then I switched schools. And it wasn't long, I got into trouble there as well.
Oh my.
Because it was a very good school, an English school.
So very proper.
Yes,
okay.
And there were a lot of Jewish children there.
Okay.
And I was German.
Oh, okay, so that didn't...
No, and at that time there was still this, you know, this anti-Jewish, anti-German animosity.
Yes.
And I didn't look for trouble. Actually, I never look for trouble first, but if trouble comes to me, I try to pay it back with interest. You know how you is?
Yes.
I didn't know about turning the other cheek. And there was a little Jewish crowd there that kept bullying me.
Oh wow.
And so when I was standing in the queues, they would come and ram me with a shoulder and call me a Hitler buddy and, you know, all of those things. And so one day I was just in the school for a short while, and this fellow did it again to me, and so I modified him.
Oh wow, okay.
I changed his appearance.
Oh wow, okay.
So I thought, well, okay, now I'm out of this school as well. And what happened was, it was a very interesting story. The headmaster called us both in, and this poor kid's nose was bleeding, his nose was broken. I mean, I really modified him. And then the headmaster, you know, he said, we can't have this. You can't act like this in our school, and if this happens, etc., etc. But then he was fair. This is the first time that I actually experienced a teacher that was fair.
Okay.
And he wanted to know what the background was, and he found out what the background was. And so in the end, he had more sympathy with me than with the other one. And so he said to him, all right, he should really punish the other one, but he's been punished enough, he can leave. And then this headmaster said to me, he made like this. And then he said, and you, young man, for the benefit of those standing outside the door, you will now get the thrashing of your life, and you will not do this again in my school, or you will be thrown out. And he said, now bend over. And he went and fetched a cane, and then he gave his chair 6 blows while he did this to me. And then he said to me, now when you go out, make as if you're holding your posterior. And so I walked out there and I was holding my posterior, and they never ever made trouble with me again. So it sometimes helps to be a little bit aggressive, although it's not a good thing. But it also gave me a sense of respect for the schooling system again.
So you started to at least look up to these schoolmasters.
Yes, and that's when I started performing better academically as well, because I had respect for the system.
All right, and so you went on with your academics, and then eventually you went to university?
Yes, I went to the military first, as you had to do, and then I went to the university. Trouble is that my stepmother didn't want my father to finance my university. And because he had means, he wasn't a poor man, I couldn't get a bursary.
Oh, wow.
And so I had to work.
Okay.
And so I worked in the evenings, and I worked over the weekends, and I worked in vacation times. And I put myself through university.
All right, so very, very busy life. And during that time, your own views about God, you basically had parked him outside, I guess.
Oh, God had been parked. I was an atheist.
Okay.
Absolute atheist. And I studied science, biology, physiology, and I became an evolutionist.
Okay.
And the university where I studied was the Afrikaans University, Stellenbosch University, and they have probably the best evolutionary-based curriculum in the Southern Hemisphere. And they had links with universities like Tübingen University, where they exchanged students, and we had postgrads from Tübingen, and so evolution was what I believed, and anybody who went against it, well, that would be a problem for me.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you had come to that level. And then I understand you had a roommate somewhere at the university.
Yes, when I was studying there, my roommate, he was a man from Natal.
Okay.
So that's quite far away, almost 2,000 kilometers away.
Okay.
And every now and then, when it was, long vacation or something like that, and I couldn't go home because there was too much strife going home with my stepmother, then I sometimes went with him home.
Okay.
And his sister, here she is, she was somewhat nicer than him.
Okay, fair enough.
So eventually I married her so that I could have a better roommate.
Oh, I'm sure you do, I'm sure you do. And so then you started meeting Sonica's family, and Sonica comes into the picture. So you saw him, what did you think at first?
He was very strange.
Oh my, okay.
He wore this these really stovepipe jeans and T-shirts with holes in them, and he had hair right down to his shoulders. He was a real rebel.
Oh my!
You could see it, but he was actually always making fun of somebody.
Oh wow!
So always making a joke, and that was quite fun.
Okay. So funny and rebellious at the same time.
Yeah, funny and rebellious.
That's how you deal with crises. You can either go under, or you become
cynical.
A kasperle. You start joking about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now your family, Sonica, then was also not quite, we would say, a normal.
No, but you see, my parents were very academic.
Okay.
My mother is professor in languages. My father was working for newspapers and advertising agencies. And so they also didn't need God.
Okay.
We were raised totally atheist.
Okay.
My father said to us, you must never go to any church because they will deceive you. They will tell you all sorts of lies. So I grew up with this idea that the academic world gives you everything, and you don't need anything from anyone or from God. But at the same time, I was experiencing, we had all these strange things in the house.
So there were strange things happening?
Yeah, but it was part of our life. I was used to it. We would sit in a chair like this and...
But you must first explain why. Your father was deeply involved in occultism.
Yeah, my father, when he was a young man, they asked him to go and do a story on poltergeist, on ghosts and things somewhere in South Africa. And he went and he thought it was a big joke. But he started to realize there's something more than what you know, we thought it was scientifically, you know, you could prove it scientifically, but he couldn't understand what was going on, why were these things happening. And he'd go with his cameraman and they'd see all these strange things, shoes walking down the passage without people and things like that. And then he started going to seances, and I think he attended many hundreds of seances.
So he was, basically your father is a non-believer in anything and started approaching these things, and he started seeing that, ooh, there are things happening.
There are things happening that you cannot explain, it's supernatural. And he started to get hooked on it, and but he was still skeptical, so he went to seances and he thought, okay, there must be some mics and some speakers somewhere. It's not an entity that is actually, it's fake. And the one day he went, he was still looking for wires under the mics under the table, and the next minute he just got a blow to his head, and he was massive hit, and he was thrown across the room.
Oh wow!
And there was no one there. There was no one that you could see physically, and he started believing that this is the departed spirits of people, because they spoke through the medium. And got more and more involved, and the more he got involved, the more he started exploring Eastern religions and Scientology and all sorts of strange things, New Age. But I remember that we used to sit in the lounge, and my mother would be reading, and there would be an empty chair, and somebody would start breathing in the chair.
So you'd actually hear sounds of breathing in an empty chair.
You could hear it, and you could actually see the movement of the person, but there's no one there.
Oh my, I'd be running.
Yeah, but that's what was so strange. I was used to it because they told us it's grandfather, it's grandpa. He's visiting us, and we would say, okay, hi Grandpa.
Oh my, okay, fair enough.
And at one stage we had a holder with grandpa's, he was dead already, obviously, but he had his walking sticks were still in the house.
So a cane.
Cane, yeah, and there were a few canes in there, and they would start rattling, and then my mother would say, "Oh, Grandpa wants to go for a walk," and so you just grew up with this idea that he was now part of our family still, even though he was dead. But yeah, at the same time, I felt there was something. All my friends were churchgoers. My friends at school, they used to go to church on Sunday, and I didn't understand why was it that my parents never went to church. And I had a problem with my brother. He was that
was his roommate.
That was his roommate.
Okay, fair enough.
My roommate.
When we were very small still, he was very abusive. He had a defect, like polio leg.
Oh, okay.
And it frustrated him, and he would beat me up when we were alone. My. So I hated going home. I hated being at home with them. So I used to roam the streets. I was often away from home, and my parents were working, and we were alone at home. So I would be out on the street, and I would go from one church to the next.
Really? So you were actually visiting churches?
I was actually trying to find out what's in there, because if my father said, don't go there, it's dangerous.
Then you got to go then.
I want to see what's in there. And I thought God was in the church. And
so really? You had that feeling that God was in the church?
Yes, I believed that God lived in a church, and that if I could go and see what's in the church, then I would see God, and I wanted to see God. So I went from one church to the next, but they were all locked.
Okay.
And I was very unhappy because I really had a hard life at home. My brother was really mean. And so I wanted to flee. I just wanted to be where it's safe. And I went from one church to the next, and they were all locked. Eventually I found a little church that was open, and it was abandoned. It was like there was no one there. A little dark place in a forest. And I opened this door, and I went inside, and it was just quiet. And I used to go there every single day and go and sit and sing.
Really? And so how old were you at that time?
I was about, I'd say about 10 10 years
wow.
old.
So as a young lady of 10 years, you would go into that church, enter into that maybe semi-dark room, little abandoned church, and sing by yourself, hear your voice.
Sing, just hear my voice. And I didn't know any religious songs, so I used to sing Christmas songs.
Okay.
So I'd sing and sing until, I used to sing till the tears were running. I was just crying and singing.
You were lonely, of course, I guess.
I was lonely.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you were growing up with your brother, and he was mean, but then he went off to university, and then he brings this fellow with long hair and rebellious looking.
Yes, yes. And in the I was 15 years old when I met him.
Okay.
So he wasn't interested in me at all. I was the little baby sister.
Okay, so you were the little baby in the family.
Yeah, but then what happened was he had a girlfriend, and they broke up, and he then came
that way.
and he came to our house for the long holidays, for the December holidays, and he and my brother, they planned to go up to Mozambique.
Oh wow.
And there was still space for me because my brother's girlfriend went with.
Okay.
And then they said, why don't you come along? So I went along. And this is where we had this romantic island where we stayed. And we just enjoyed the swimming. They used to catch fish, and we'd live off the land there, the wild, yeah. And that's how we actually started to
know each other
date,
better. Okay. Wow. And so you were brought into this family, and you were an atheist.
Yes.
But there were lots of spiritual or spiritistic things happening there. What was going through your mind then, Walter, as all of this was happening?
You see, if you are in the esoteric world, then you don't believe in God, but yet you accept the spirit realm.
Okay, that was what was happening in their family.
Yes, and basically, you know, I had many discussions with her brother, who was obviously also deeply involved, also involved in Scientology.
Okay.
And then I had many discussions with her father. He, by then, was very prominent in the whole New Age movement. I mean, that was a new movement, remember?
Okay.
And he was one of the first ones to actually bring it into the country.
Wow.
And started printing books, and he printed books on seance and inner space and the power within, and mixing Eastern philosophy with this. And as a scientist, you say, well, you know, there are many things I cannot explain.
Okay.
You can talk about whatever. You can talk about magnetism or gravity. You can measure it. Or magnetism, you can measure it. You can measure the force. You can have the theory as to what it arises from, you know, this or that or the other, electrical fields and all of that. But what is magnetism? There's no definition for what it is.
Okay.
And yet you can lift up a car with it, or, you know, even more, you can lift up anything with magnetism. It's a tremendous force, and there's nothing there. So nothing is lifting up everything. And so as a scientist, moving with the modern physics movement, you get into quantum physics. And quantum physics eventually has some form of deity. Although it isn't a person or God, it is something there that helps you to deal with all of these forces. And the projections of your energy cannot be destroyed when you die. Well, maybe, you know, eventually you get involved in this sort of thing, and it makes sense, and you can see it happening, so there must be something there.
Okay, so you were at least being faced with a lot of this happening, and so you were trying to frame them within your own scientific understanding of the world.
And so I started reading everything about the occult world as well.
Oh, wow.
My father-in-law actually gave me some training sessions on how to do an out-of-body experience.
Oh my, okay.
Yeah, you have to actually go on a special diet.
Oh my. Okay.
They are largely vegetarian at that stage. And for me, that was impossible. I was carnivore all the way through. But I would practice out-of-body experiences.
Oh wow.
And actually could do them, which is rather scary.
Spooky to me, at least. I wouldn't advise any of our viewers to go this path. Okay, that's not what we're advertising at all.
No.
Okay, but anyways, at that time, then of course your relationship was progressing, and eventually you got more into teaching at the university. And then when is it that you got married exactly?
I was also studying at that time at Stellenbosch University, and
so same university as Walter.
Same university, and it was in my second year that we decided to get married, and it was in 1974.
Oh wow, that's nice. So there you are. You build a happy family, and of course then you have children eventually.
No. Before that.
Okay, fair enough.
When we'd just been married, and I got a position at the University of Natal.
Okay.
So that's more where her parents lived.
Okay, so it's like really far away than the University of Stellenbosch where Sonica was studying.
She actually interrupted her studies.
Oh wow.
And we went to that university to start my lecturing academic career.
Okay.
And we moved into a home there, and her father, was very close by, and we had this liaison. And that's where we had our first major occult experience.
Oh wow.
What also happened is that some of the people that we were involved with came and were active in Ouija boards and all kinds of spirit consultations. And things started just going crazy in that house.
Oh wow.
And at night we would have experiences that I wouldn't wish upon anyone. There were poltergeist experiences in our house. Our dishes would go flying around the house. People would come and visit, and wine glasses would literally jump off the table, and they'd say, "What's going on in your house? I mean, this is weird. Look at that. Whoom, there goes a wine glass jumping off the table."
But always at the back of your mind, you're trying to explain it in a natural way. You say, "Oh, well, somebody just bumped it," or you're trying to say that this world doesn't exist.
Okay.
But then you come to a point where you have to admit that there is a world out there that you cannot explain.
Okay.
Yeah, and it started affecting our personal relationship.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Now we had a dog, a big Rottweiler.
Oh wow.
He was like a member of the family.
Okay.
And when these phenomena started happening in the house, he would growl.
Really?
Yeah, so he would look at something fixed and growl, and there was nothing there.
At least nothing you could see.
No. And then one night we came home from her father's. By that time we were pretty nervous, because every single thing that you can imagine that could go wrong did go wrong.
So you started really being afraid at this stage. There was really something at a home that was fighting against both of you then.
Yeah.
Yes. And one night I came home and opened my bed to climb into bed, and we had still sealed boxes that we'd brought from the Cape when we'd moved up there that hadn't been unpacked. And in one of these sealed boxes she had some of her childhood things, and one of them was a stuffed black cat.
Okay.
That was in a sealed box. And when I opened this bed, this black cat was on my side of the bed, under the blanket. And
he had a nervous breakdown.
It freaked me out. That
so that was
totally freaked me out.
The scientist is over everything.
That's it. We took that box down. Now this can only be a thief or somebody that came and ripped everything apart, and, and stole things and put it there and what have you. And we took these boxes down, and the box was sealed. There was nothing. There was how that cat got out of that box onto my bed. That just blew me away. And so I decided, we have to exercise this house.
Okay, so no more quantum physics. Now you go back to your Catholic roots.
Now my Catholic background starts working.
Okay.
So anyway, first you don't want to have anything to do with the Catholic Church, right?
Okay.
Because you've written that off. So her father came.
So you first wanted her father to do something, not directly with the church.
So
okay.
her father came to the house, and he did whatever they do.
Garlic in the corners.
And garlic, and he made signs of the pentagrams everywhere, and he commanded, that peace come into this house, and it became worse.
Oh my.
It became worse. We lost everything, all our dishes, and smashed all over the place.
The car got smashed
My car, I pull into the garage, in the garage, I'm switched off, and the whole car moves and smashes against the wall.
Oh wow! So that there was a real tormenting.
It was really scary.
And yet, for our viewers, hang on, because the Lord Jesus had a full victory in their life. So that's not the whole story, okay?
No, this is just the beginning. So eventually, well, father-in-law couldn't solve the problem. Who else can? And you know, they say once a Catholic, always a Catholic.
Okay, so that was your deep root.
Back to my deep roots, I went to the Catholic Church.
Okay.
And I said to the priest, you know, I have a problem in my home. What can you help me? I'd never been to church, right?
Yeah, for years, huh?
For years. So he said, sure, come round. So he came round to the house, brought his holy water, did his sprinkling, read from a fixed text of exorcism, and then he said, bye. Off he went. Now, that was amazing, because that night, we're lying in bed. Suddenly, the dog is lying next to it, had its bed next to our bed. Suddenly, the dog jumps up and growls and growls and growls. And you get that feeling, you know, where your hair starts going up.
Okay, so that's really spooky then.
Really spooky. And we're all alone in this house, just my wife and I. And suddenly, these heavy footsteps come down the passage.
Okay.
Oh, man, you think you're going to die. And they come down, and our door was open. And they stop at the door.
Bedroom door.
At the bedroom door, yes. But you can see nothing. But
Yes,
the dog is going absolutely ballistic, growling, staring, and
okay. So you know there's something, but there's nothing. Okay,
I don't see nothing. And this individual or whatever it was knocks on the door, but loud. Gwah, gwah.
So this after you have had the experience with the priest coming and doing his ritual.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that night on, there was nothing. It was gone. House was clean.
So that was as if there was a warning there, and that was it.
It was as if the Spirit came and said, okay, you know, I'm saying bye.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, I've been exorcised, bye.
Oh, wow.
And so I thought, wow, that's neat. But I still didn't go back to church.
Sure, you just had them help you, and that was enough.
That was it. And then I got a position at Stellenbosch University.
So you went back all the way.
So we thought, well, that's a tremendous chance. Let's go back. She can finish her studies.
Yes.
And that's when we went back, and that's when our first child was born, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
So family was starting. Okay,
Family was
fair
starting.
enough. And then you had a second child, and you had a third child.
Yeah.
So what, 2 boys and 1 girl?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was still dabbling in the occult. People won't believe this, but it's real. But of course, today I know this is not a real experience. This is a mental implant. It's like a hypnotic implant.
Oh wow.
It's not a real experience.
Mm-hmm.
But if you did, for example, an out-of-body experience, which was a dangerous thing to do because it involved breathing exercises, and you could just end up dead as well doing that process. But I would do that. I would, you know, the child's crying in the room next door. When they're a little bigger, they get their own room. You know, you can have some peace and quiet. The child is crying. I would not get up out of bed. I would just do that and go and look. And come back to her and say, no, come back in, and then say, no, the kid's okay. Then she would say, you know,
yes, of course, what are you doing, she'd say,
I walked through the wall, I went and looked. What did you see? And I said, well, the child's lying like this, the bottle's lying over there, it's just grumbling a little bit. Then she'd go and check, and it was like that.
Oh, wow. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
That's very spooky to me. Okay.
But it's a hypnotic implant.
Okay.
So it's demonic. It's to keep you going. And for example, he taught me how to read auras. So I was heavy into New Age philosophy, and I could read an aura. So if somebody walks into my office, I would cancel the person out and look at the aura.
Okay.
And then say, okay, he's in a good mood, he's in a bad mood, I can talk to him about this, and it was quite useful.
Okay.
So you're deeply into all of this occult nonsense.
You're getting all these supposedly extra powers.
Yes, you have all these extra powers. And other than that, life was normal.
So you were advancing in your academic career?
Yes.
And then, was this a time when your father-in-law, so your father, came living close to you?
Yes.
Yeah, he actually came and lived with us.
He divorced.
Oh, okay.
So her parents had divorced.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he moved down to the Cape.
Okay.
And then he started working there.
All right. So he was living with you, and you were pregnant.
Mm. Yeah, and I was very sick. For the 9 months, I think I had constant pneumonia. I was coughing and I had fevers, and they put me in hospital, they put me on drips, and then I'd come out and I'd recover a bit and then go back on drips again. When that child was born, he had this terrible frown on his face because of this constant antibiotics and constant coughing, and his life, well, you could see his life was a misery in the womb already.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was really hard.
So you're having these massive health problems during the pregnancy, and then, of course, when he was born, he looked like he had really suffered a lot.
He suffered a lot.
And there was something strange about this child.
Yeah, he was very insecure, and he was fighting you all the way. You couldn't feed him without tying him, sort of putting blankets around him. Otherwise, he would just push you and scratch and carry on. And there was not a minute that you had peace. I had constantly had to, rock him or push him in a stroller or something.
Wow.
So we really battled with him for the first 1.5 years, I think. And then it got actually worse.
Oh my, so already a big fight for the 1.5 years, and then it got worse,
Then it suddenly got worse. Then
one night, it was exactly 2 o'clock, because we had a digital clock on our bed.
Okay.
And I would wake up at 2 o'clock, just bathed in sweat. And I'd had this dream that I was being strangled, but it was very realistic.
Yes.
And I'd sit up in bed, and then I'd see this clock, and it was 2 o'clock. And then a few seconds later, he would scream in the next room like he was being murdered. And the two of us would jump up out of bed and pick him up, and he would go into convulsions.
Oh, wow.
High
so it was
fever.
A very, very, very traumatic.
It was very traumatic. And he got such high fevers, and he would then get fever cramps, and then he'd just go limp.
Wow.
And so it was very traumatic, and we used to phone the doctor. The doctor said, rush him to hospital, I'll meet you there. And so, middle of the night, you're rushing through to hospital, you get him there, and they literally had to fight for his life to keep him alive.
So he was really on the verge of death. I mean,
yes, it was very serious.
Wow.
And they said, put him into a cool bath, try to get the temperatures down. Nothing worked, nothing.
Really?
And then they'd put him into the hospital, into a cooling tent. They put a tent over the cot, and they blow cool air into it to try and get his temperature down, and put him on a drip, and then he'd recover.
He'd recover, he'd go home, be fine for a while.
Then at 2 o'clock I'd have the same dream.
So this was actually recurring.
Repetitive.
Bam, at exactly the same time, 2 o'clock.
Same dream,
same thing.
Same result. And once or twice when we got him to the hospital, they already told us, I think you're too late this time. And
really?
It was very traumatic. But it pulled through every time.
Wow. And so what were you thinking then as a scientist in your head? Because, I mean, this obviously
doesn't click, right?
Well, it wouldn't click to me.
Exactly. So, if it happens once or twice, you'll say that this is chance. And I was phobic about 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I was scared, shirtless,
yes.
2 o'clock in the morning. And we would take turns sitting in the hospital through the night. And it was very hard on us because I have to teach at the university, and sometimes I sit half the night there, and I would work. So I would take my work to the hospital and sit next to the child, and then if it's her turn, she'll take my place. And one night I was sitting there, and I was marking scripts scripts, medical student scripts.
Okay, so papers and, okay.
And I was marking them, and I'm always watching the clock, and I'm watching 2 o'clock, you know, and I get apprehensive, and then 2 o'clock. Suddenly this child screams like you cannot believe, spot on 2 o'clock. And he immediately goes into convulsions there in his bed. And I rush and I fetch the nurse, and they fetch him and they hold him, and the nurse is shaking so that
the baby, huh?
Yes, the drip that he had into the arms, they couldn't find the veins later anymore. He was there so often. So they had it that night, was in his head, in this vein.
So no room on his arms because they were all blue because of that,
yeah.
And so they had to put it in his head.
Put it in his head, yeah. And it was stuck there with plaster, of course.
Okay.
But he's moving so in my arms, and I'm trying to keep him calm, that this thing tore out. Now, there's nothing that bleeds like a head wound.
Of course.
And so this blood was squirting all over, and the child was in this state, and I just cracked. That's it. That's it.
You went berserk.
I went, yeah, a little bit crazy. Anyway, they got the child back, calmed down, got the drips back in, found another vein, closed that one up, and then I sat there, and she was going to come and relieve me at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Wow. Okay.
Because I had lectures.
Yes.
And when she came at 6 o'clock, I'd been thinking, and I'd remembered that Catholic priest had solved the problem.
In the other home.
In the other home. Now, this was years later. How many years later? 5 years later? Maybe more. I don't know. I can't remember. No, more than 5 years later. Yes, much more. And I thought to myself, I'm going to the Catholic Church, because this is a cult. This has got nothing to do with natural causes, because, you know, the 2 o'clock issue. So off I went to the Catholic Church, and I was there early in the morning. She relieved me at 6, so I was there at 6:30.
Wow, okay.
I was there. And the Catholic priest was actually awake.
Okay.
He was sitting in his office, and I walked in there, and you know, he was actually German. I'd never been to that church, but he was, you know, he was slightly aloof.
Okay.
And so I didn't know how to approach him, so I just said to him, you know, I have a problem in my home, and could you help? I was wondering whether you could perhaps help, because the church has helped me before. I am a Catholic, I'm not practicing, I know I should be better, but, you know, I have a problem. So he asked me, are things happening in your house? Is it a strange thing, sort of thing? And I said, yes. And he said, no, that's not my field.
So he immediately refused?
Yeah, immediately refused. He says, I don't touch that, but give me your number and give me your name, and I'll get in contact with a specialist and we'll come back to you.
So somebody, a specialist within the Catholic Church, would then address your problem.
That's right. And so I went home and got showered and whatever, and I was pretty upset with him, because I thought, you know, last time the guy just came and the problem was gone. What's his case, you know? Why doesn't he do it? But anyway, it was that same afternoon. I think it was the same day. Afternoon, I went back from we lived close to the university, so I always went home for lunch. So I went home for lunch, and I was just sitting down, and the phone rang. And it's a man, and he says that he's the chief exorcist of the Catholic Church, of the cathedral, and he happens to be at a monastery nearby, and whether I would like to come and see him.
Okay.
And so I thought, wow, that's nice, thank you. And I said, thank you, I'll be there. And off I went, found out where it was. Now I walk into this place, I'm alone, my wife didn't go with me, because after all, I'm the Catholic.
Okay.
And here is this man, an elderly gentleman in his 70s, I assumed. And he said to me, sit down. And then he says, now I hear the devil is plaguing you at your home. And I said, yes, that is correct. And I would now think he would ask me, tell me what's happening, right?
Ask you questions about the problem. Okay.
No. He says to me, the devil is trying to kill your youngest son.
Just like that, straight?
Just like that.
Without even knowing you had a son?
No. And I never said anything to this other priest because, it was early in the morning, and I didn't say anything about what had happened. He didn't let me get further than there's a problem, I'll come back to you.
So only your name and your number you gave him, and that's it. Now this other man is telling you, you got a son.
There's
and
a
that
problem
son has a problem, they're trying to kill him.
Yeah, then I said, wow, how do you know? He says, I've known for a long time already.
Really? He told you that?
And I said, excuse me, that's not possible. And he just smiled and he said, yes, that's possible.
Oh, wow.
I know that the devil is trying to kill your youngest son, and that you need a very special exorcism in your home.
Wow.
A normal exorcism won't even work, he said. I have to say a mass, an exorcism mass in your home. That's the only thing that will solve your problem. So I said, wow, okay, whatever it takes, I'm ready for anything now. He says, well, I need permission from the bishop to do that.
Okay.
Because you don't just say a mass in someone's house like that, you need permission. So I said, okay, how long will that take? He says, I already have it.
So he pulled out
a letter and showed me a letter signed by the bishop.
Already signed?
Already signed, that he could do an exorcism in my house with a mass. Now, wow, that just flattened me. That's the end of my opposition. So I told him, okay, but I have a problem. I haven't been, a good Catholic. I'm basically an atheist and this and that and the other. He says, well, that's no problem. You're here now. And I said, yeah, and my wife, I said, she's also an atheist and she's Dutch Reformed. What are we going to do? He said, well, that'll change.
Oh, wow. So he
was
calm, positive and cool about the whole thing.
So he made an appointment and he came to our house. And what was your impression of him?
He was very dignified, very calm and like a gentle kind of person.
Okay.
And I was very impressed with the way, although he didn't want anything to know about us. He just focused on what he was doing.
Okay.
Yeah. Not even on the baby. The baby wasn't even there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just on what he had to do.
Yeah,
but he gave you this appearance of a very dignified and gentle person.
Yes.
Okay.
And then he asked for water. We gave him some water in a bowl. And he took out some salt and he made a sign of the cross with the salt. Then he said whatever he had to say. Then he took this water and then he went to every window in the house and every door and he took some of the water and he made a cross with the water on the doors and on the windows, and when it evaporates there was this salt stain.
So the crystals were still shining.
Yeah, just vaguely you could see it because it wasn't a strong solution. And so he would go from room to room doing whatever he did, and then when he came into the child's room, boy, all blazes broke loose. Some entity grabbed him and started throwing him around the room.
So you were seeing him just being shaken everywhere.
I thought he was going to die.
Really?
Yes, I thought he was going to die. So I ran in and I tried to help him. But he wasn't even perturbed.
Nope.
He was being thrown around and he was just saying his thing and then calm.
Okay.
And he went into the next room and then he came into our room and then something grabbed him again.
Oh, wow. So in the babies, in the little one's room, and then in your room, he started shaking around.
That's right. And then he was finished, and then he said, okay, we have to say the Mass in the child's room, because that's where it was the worst. So he asked for a table, and we brought the table and stuff, put it down. And he took off a ring, which he said had a relic in it, because you have to have a relic when you say a Mass.
Okay.
And he put it down, and then as he was preparing to say the Mass, we had 2 dogs, a Rottweiler and a cat. Suddenly down the passage you just hear tick, 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 tick. The animals came running. They came running, literally running over themselves to get there. And they came and whoop, sat in a half circle.
Really? Just circled him?
Yeah.
Just like Noah's Ark?
It was weird.
They all came there, they were staring there.
They were just sitting there.
They were just sitting there.
All of a sudden?
All of a sudden, cat, dog, wife, me, dog, there they sat.
Oh my.
And he did the Mass, and then he took out amulets from Lourdes.
Okay.
Said, hang these over every child's bed. And he still said, they're not fake, they're the real ones.
Okay, well, they had to be, I guess, with your problem.
And then he took off his own cross, which was amazing, his own cross. And he said, hang this over this child's bed.
Wow. So he gave a great gift for the baby.
Yeah, and he put that there. And then, you tell him about your pot.
Yeah. I felt so overwhelmed and guilty that he was doing something for us and we weren't returning anything. So I was at that stage doing pottery, and I was giving pottery classes. And I had a nice big pot, my best one that I'd made. And so I ran and I gave him this pot. He didn't want to take anything, no money. We offered him money, but he wouldn't take anything. So he said, all right, he'll take this pot and he'll put it in the nunnery or the monastery where the nuns never see the world.
Oh wow, so a convent
it's
where
like
there's these reclusion monks. And,
and he'll put it and he'll give it to them. So we were quite happy with that.
And so off he went. Now, you must know that every night you put the child to bed, he would scream his head off.
So you had this reoccurrence, and every day essentially you knew something was wrong.
Yeah. And she would sit for hours rocking him and trying to get him to sleep, and he would lie on his side in fetal positions and really be miserable.
Yes.
And that night she put him to bed, and he lay on his back. He'd never done that in his entire life.
Wow.
And he just put out his arms and he giggled, and it was a different child.
Wow.
And from that night onwards, every night was like a totally different child.
So you're waiting for your 2 o'clock, nothing happened.
Nothing. Total peace. Problem solved. Twice now.
This is actually quite interesting, and I want to know more. I invite you to stay tuned and actually hear what's happening in the next segment and how Jesus leads them into further truth.